And we are. Hello everyone, and welcome to this session of Leaders Live today. Thank you so much for joining. Today's session is called The Hydrogen Revolution, Your Questions Answered. So to give a bit of background to this and why we're doing this session today, a few weeks ago we went inside Worcester Bosch and took a look at their new hydrogen boiler and talked about how hydrogen will be one of the core elements of energy that could potentially heat our homes in the future. And with that, we had so many questions from our community, thank you very much, that came from that session. We felt that really we could do another session on this based around all of those great questions that the community answered. So thank you for that. And what we're doing today is really taking a lot of those questions that you brought together, and we're going to use that as part of the session today. Equally, we are sharing this across Zoom, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And there is a chat function both in Zoom and in YouTube for you to please use and put forward your comments, your questions, your thoughts into those chat boxes. We've got a number of experts from Bosch on there today as well to help answer some of those questions. And equally, they'll be sending some of those through to me and the team so that we can then ask the panelists your questions. So we'll have a debate and a discussion for the next sort of 30 odd minutes. And then we're going to go into proper direct Q&A with the panelists as well. So we will be really interested to get your thoughts and your questions from that. So without further ado, what I want to do is just quickly introduce our panel today. And firstly, I'll start with Stefan. Stefan, would you like to just quickly introduce yourself to the audience today?
Yeah, thanks, Helen, and thanks all for joining this session today. My name is Stefan Hoffmann. I'm the president of Bosch UK. You will know Bosch maybe from our consumer products division, home appliances, washing machines, that kind of thing, power tools, and it's a sizable part of the business, but the largest part of our business is actually automotive, which is about 60% globally. Here in the UK, it's about 50%. And we also have a sizable business with building technologies, mainly residential heating. And I think that's going to be our main topic for today.
Thanks so much, Stefan. And the next, I would like to introduce Carl. Carl, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Yes, thanks, Helen. And likewise, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Carl Anton, and I'm the Chief Exec at Worcester Bosch. And I was part of the team who presented on Leaders Live a few weeks ago from the Worcester Bosch plant. So looking forward to the discussion and the debate.
Thanks so much, Carl. And lastly, I'd like to just introduce Alexander. Alexander, would you like to introduce yourself, please, to the audience? And thanks very much for joining.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Henry. My name is Alexander Stafford. I'm a Member of Parliament for Rother Valley. I sit in Parliament on the Business, Energy, Industrial Strategy Select Committee, so our future of our climate. And prior to being elected, I worked for Shell on new technologies, including low emission transport.
Thank you so much, Alexander. Thank you, everyone. I think we've got an amazing panel today, so I'm really looking forward to the conversation, and I'm sure our audience is as well. So to kick off then, and I think it's probably quite timely. So we've seen in recent weeks, there's been quite a lot of interest in the press around hydrogen. And in particular, quite recently, the Prime Minister also reported that he wants to see a green revolution of jobs. And within that, that would include hydrogen. So just really interested, I think, initially from all of you on the panel, just to get your thoughts on that and what the potential is. And why not, let's start with you, Alexander, on that question, and then we'll hand over to the gentleman at Bosch.
Thank you. I should also say I'm also the Vice Chair of the All Parliamentary Party Group on hydrogen, so it's a subject which I'm very keen about. The world is going net zero. Some places quicker, some places slower, but the whole world is going to go to a low carbon future. Now, my view and view of this government, hopefully, is that we should get there as a UK, get there first. Get there first, not only in terms of actually achieving that goal, but also get there first in terms of developing the skills, the models to get to a low carbon future. So there's a whole suite of things, such as financial models, such as new technology, such as carbon capture and storage. Now, quite a lot of the conversation has been in the press about batteries and electrification, which is great and very essential is what we need. However, I believe that quite a lot of technology, we've already missed the boat. Yes, we can utilize that technology, but we're never going to compete now with the likes of China when it comes to battery production. But where we can as a country compete is really on those developing technologies, those which other countries really haven't embraced as much, especially hydrogen. Now, if we take advantage of hydrogen and we're going to have a hydrogen strategy next year, invest heavily in hydrogen, we not only can help lower emissions, whether it's in home heating, whether it's in heavy duty transport, planes, boats, we can then sell that technology and the expertise across the world, benefiting other countries, their carbon emissions, but also benefiting jobs here at home. I represent a red wall seat, a heart of sort of the mining community formerly. Hydrogen and the opportunities by hydrogen develop can really uplift and level up these sort of northern areas in England, which desperately need jobs. And I think hydrogen is going to be that solution to so many of our problems. It's low emissions, but also our economy. And to me, we can't dissociate the economy and the green revolution. But if you get it right, we can benefit our climate and we can benefit our country economically.
Fantastic. Thanks, Alexander. Carl, I'd be interested from your perspective. Obviously, being based in Worcester, you obviously have a decently sized employee base. What do you think the opportunities are for you as a company?
Well, we're one of the leading companies selling heating technology here into the UK, and obviously heat is one of the main contributors towards carbon emissions at the moment, and therefore coming up with practical workable solutions on how we decarbonise the energy system for the UK is really at the heart of our activity and our interests moving forward. And I think the beauty of hydrogen, Alexander has mentioned it to a certain extent already, that it's not just a solution for heating, or it's not just a solution for heavy goods transport. There are several opportunities across the whole energy system. And therefore, once you come to a decision about the future of hydrogen in the decarbonised energy system moving forward, then there are opportunities really to use it in several different sectors of the economy. And heating is one of those that is clearly in the hard-to-do box. We've been talking about decarbonising heat for 12 to 15 years, as I remember, and I've been in the thick of that debate all that time. And we still haven't come to any sort of final decision. So it's not the total solution, but it's an important element of the solution moving forward.
Thanks, Carl. Stefan, how do you see it playing out? I guess from your perspective, a more macro perspective from Bosch, and perhaps in particular from the transport side of things.
Yeah. Well, you see, the green agenda and decarbonisation is a giant task for all of us. It's the task of our time. And what I would say is that the most important thing is to stay technology neutral or technology agnostic in this undertaking. That has been the experience in the past that we have achieved the best result by being very clear on the targets and the objectives that we wanted to achieve, but allow as many different ways and avenues towards that goal as possible. And I would even say we cannot afford to shut out certain technologies from the beginning. I'm saying this as a representative of Bosch, and we very much believe in battery-based electric vehicles. We have spent round about 500 million euros every year for the last 10 years on that technology, and we are a big player in that area now. But there are areas in mobility that you cannot reasonably meaningfully reach with electric vehicles, and that's where for us hydrogen comes in, fuel cell in areas for commercial vehicles, for certain driving cycles, passenger cars, then outside of automotive, if you look at things like cargo trains, for example, and last but not least, clean hydrogen as a basis for synthetic fuels. which would allow us to not only address future vehicles that have yet to come on the road, but that can also decarbonize vehicles that are already part of the current vehicle population.
Thank you, Stefan. I get where all of you have talked about both the economy and the environment. I'm interested also, where is the benefit, do you think, with hydrogen as a possible solution, both in terms of things like transport and heating? Where is the benefit for the consumer? What can we as customers expect from this possible part of the solution, do you think? Why not, Stefan? Let's start with you on this one. Just from that perspective, from a consumer point of view, I'd be really interested in your thoughts on that.
Well, it's obviously it has many different facets depending on which product you're looking at. For the consumer of a vehicle, the benefit of fuel cell is obviously that it allows you ranges that are still difficult to reach with an electric vehicle. For the consumer of or the inhabitant of a house who wants to heat his house, the benefit comes from the fact that you don't have to necessarily change to a completely different set of hardware, i.e. heat pumps, electric heating, which is not suitable in the UK for a number of reasons. It starts with the climate in the UK, which is very mild. You don't typically heat throughout the winter. So that is all not conducive to heat pumps. And it goes on to things like the housing stock in the UK, where it is extremely challenging to fit a heat pump into an existing Victorian or Georgian house. You would battle to do that, and even if you manage to, you would mess it up because you typically need new radiators as well. So it's a myriad of benefits for the consumer. And it connects to what I said earlier, and is the reason why we have to stay technology neutral and allow different technologies in this process.
Thanks, Stefan. Alexander, from your perspective, just thinking about the consumer, where do you see, where do they win on this? You know, looking at hydrogen, where are the benefits directly for them? You know, 5 years, 10 years into the future, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, I think quite for a lot of consumers, they won't necessarily see the immediate effects of it, because I think when we're talking about hydrogen, how consumers will experience it is potentially through the heating system or through transport, but only certain transport. Only we're talking about HGVs, planes, boats. So probably the transport won't affect them too much. Apart from, and I think this is very exciting about the clean air side of things. So at the moment, most buses in this country, in the UK, are diesel. Yes, there are some few electric, a few hydrogen, but at the moment it's diesel. Now there's tens of thousands of buses in this country. I know Wrightbus have got this plan that they can basically make hydrogen buses at cost parity to diesel bus if they have a few tens of thousands, sorry, a few thousand buses. They can make that cost parity. Now, if we replace all our diesel buses with hydrogen buses, which just emit sort of water vapor, that will transform the air quality, especially in sort of inner cities. There's so many schools right by busy roads. If you take those pollutions out from the bus network, from the HGV network, that's going to improve, frankly, and that will people's lives and create better health for the children. I think that is where they're going to see. On the heating side, I think a lot of consumers do care about the emissions from their heating, from their cooking. So anything that we as a government or an industry can actually use to help people, give them that choice and say, actually, it doesn't matter. You have to worry about the effect on the environment if you're burning hydrogen. I think that's going to actually have a huge material effect on what people are doing. And I think that's very positive. Thank
you. Carl, from your perspective from a heating, just perhaps following on from Alexander's point, how do you see the consumer benefiting from a hydrogen boiler in the future for them?
Yeah, I think it's building on what both Alexander and Stefan have said. It's about what alternative technologies are available, and what behavior change the consumer would have to enact to operate those technologies. So as Stefan alluded to earlier on, if you install a heat pumps are designed to operate on very low temperatures, background trickle heating almost, and you need a well-insulated property with stable ambient temperatures inside the house to operate those appliances and that heating system efficiently. That's not the way we operate our heating systems in the UK. We switch our boilers on and off. The temperatures fluctuate in the UK quite dramatically. Those temperatures fluctuate inside the properties, and consumers are used to turning their thermostats up and down and getting a very high rapid reaction from the central heating system. So to operate an electrified heating system, heat pumps particularly efficiently and effectively, consumers have to significantly change their behavior. So the big advantage of hydrogen is effectively, its hydrogen boiler looks very, very similar to a natural gas boiler. The only difference is it's burning a different fuel, but the consumer behavior, the way of operating that is identical to an existing gas boiler.
Okay. Thanks for that, Carl. Chet Lyons actually asked on YouTube if you could describe how that technology, how the hydrogen technology can be applied to heating. How do you see that working? Does it simply just flow through the existing piping? What would need to be done for this to work and to heat our homes? It's
principally very similar to the change from town's gas to natural gas back in the early 1970s. So you take the UK as a whole, you decide to switch over and repurpose the gas network to hydrogen from natural gas, and you do that town by town, city by city, region by region. And effectively, the government decides at some point in the future that the gas supplied by the state is hydrogen. We repurpose, we switch the grid over section by section, and then we have to convert the appliances to fire on that new gas coming through the gas system. So it is a fairly elongated process. It would probably take 15 years or so to repurpose the whole gas network over to hydrogen from natural gas. Brilliant, thank you. One question we've had on our last session, and I'm sure we may well get it again, is a very simple one. Is hydrogen safe? And I guess particularly with hydrogen coming into our homes, is it safe? And likewise, from a driving perspective, is it actually safe? With cars and vehicles. Carl, do you want to just answer the one for heating, and then I'll go to the other gents for the other question. I'm glad you asked that way around. In terms of hydrogen firing in a boiler, yes, that's a lot of the early prototyping that we've been doing over the last couple of years to establish, can you burn 100% hydrogen in the home safely and efficiently? In actual fact, although hydrogen has different properties to natural gas, a lot of the properties are also very similar. So we've definitely proved that you can fire 100% hydrogen in a boiler that is in exactly the same footprint. So it's the same size, same physical look as a natural gas boiler. But there are a couple of things different between hydrogen and natural gas. One, hydrogen flame is invisible, so the way we sense a flame and control that combustion flame is different. And then the speed with which hydrogen ignites and the flame is established is much faster with hydrogen than natural gas. But in terms of safety, we have designed now all of the controls and safety protocols to manage that different flame speed that you get from hydrogen. And in actual fact, now part of the work we've done with BEIS is to prove to some extent that hydrogen boilers would be safer than natural gas boilers, because all the incidents you get with natural gas is from carbon monoxide poisoning. Well, of course, you get no carbon emissions from a hydrogen boiler whatsoever, so you would never get any carbon monoxide emissions. And hence, from that point of view, we're even arguing it's safer than natural gas. Thanks, Carl. Stefan, from your point of view on transport, but before I ask you the transport question, Salvador on YouTube also asked about the possibility of hydrogen-fueled cookers. Do you see Bosch looking into those anytime soon?
theoretically it's a possibility, because you see, in any fuel cell application, whether it be in a car or in any other home appliance or so, you see, a car is powered by electricity, not by hydrogen, and that's the difference between hydrogen in heating and hydrogen in any fuel cell application. And that, I would say, also answers the other question: is it safe? It would probably be at least as safe as in heating, because you are looking at something entirely new in a vehicle that you can design on the basis of high safety standards. But maybe I would introduce reintroduce this issue of synthetic fuels, because synthetic fuels, the way we see it, it's based on clean hydrogen, which you combine by a reaction by using CO2 that you take out of the atmosphere. And what you get as an end result is a liquid fuel that is very similar to petrol and diesel in its character, and you can store hydrogen very easily with synthetic fuels, and you can transport it over a long distance. So that in itself is yet another, when you say safety, is yet another step for a much safer use of hydrogen.
Thank you. Thanks, Stefan. Alexander, just bringing you in on this question, I guess, where is the government's mind at from a policy point of view, I guess, in ensuring the kind of the safe rollout of hydrogen-based technologies here in the UK?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo basically what Stefan said, first of all, about the safety. The report that I've read, it's no more dangerous than petrol or diesel. And I think that's in some ways, quite how interesting and useful hydrogen is technology, especially for transport. Because if we're dealing with those mindsets already with petrol and diesel, it's basically doing the same with charging a car or vehicle with hydrogen and petrol fuel. It's people's ideas of the level of safety and how to use and ease of use is very important. Now, obviously, safety is the most important thing. We'll never rule out technology that wasn't safe. And I think next year the government's going to announce a hydrogen strategy. We haven't got the details of that, but clearly there's something they're going to heavily invest in. And if there's any whiff that hydrogen itself will be any more dangerous, I think that would put the kibosh on things. But there's no evidence that I've seen or reports that we've seen on the base electricity that is any more dangerous. Obviously, there are risks, just like we're dealing with petrol or diesel as well. If it's handled incorrectly or other things, there will be risks. But those are no more than petrol or diesel. So in fact, it's very easy technology to understand. It treats it in a very similar way and handles it in a very similar way, petrol and diesel, when it comes to transport.
Thank you. We've had quite a few questions as well come in on YouTube around how the UK can use hydrogen as a way to be more competitive in the future. So we've seen lots of other countries, Richard Evans on here and Wayne Fielder have also said about how other countries are now waking up to hydrogen as a part of a solution of a wider green economy. How do we as the UK stay competitive? How do we make sure on this time we don't miss the boat? To your point earlier, Alexander, in terms of other forms of technology we've missed the boat on, how do we make sure we capture this one now? What should we do, and what really should we be seeing in this hydrogen strategy that the government is developing?
Well, I think speed is the essence. I think we've got a very narrow window, 5 years maybe, to actually invest heavily and get this going. And we've got to realize it is a bit of a gamble, because there's going to be a myriad of solutions for transport and decarbonisation. Hydrogen is just one, and we need to be able to get the advantage. We need to sort of bet now that this is going to be the future. And looking at all the evidence out there, especially when it comes to home heating, especially when it comes to heavy-duty transport, including planes, boats, and HGVs, the current other technologies just do not work if we want to low carbon. So we need to basically move quickly, have government investments. I hope the hydrogen strategy heavily lends into that and almost bets the house on hydrogen, and they've realized that we can buy the technologies, the battery technologies, the charging technologies from other countries. But for hydrogen, if we make the UK a world leader in this, then we can then export that across the globe and have the dividends. But it does take a bit of guts to do it. because we should be leading the pack rather than waiting for this technology to be, better than everywhere else. Otherwise, we'll miss some of the golden opportunity, and that is the economic side of things. And that is important. Just like we heavily invested in the North Sea oil when that was discovered, which was a bit of a gamble on that, we have to invest heavily now and take that chance there and commit to it as well. We can't have any prevarication, go back and forth. This is where we're going to do, and this is going to be the UK's niche when it comes to that myriad of solutions in low carbon. Hydrogen could be ours, and take ownership of it. There's no country, as far as I'm aware or believe, at the moment that's taking ownership of hydrogen and hydrogen technology, and not even China. And if we do it now, we can do it, because give it 3 or 4 years and China will be pushing forward themselves, but we need to get there first.
Thanks, Alexander. Carl, I'm sure that some of those points there made were probably music to your ears. How quickly do you feel that Worcester Bosch could move on this hydrogen heating technology, and how quickly could this potentially be offered in the UK from your perspective?
I think very quickly, and I wholeheartedly agree with what Alexander's just said, and it's music to my ears, quite frankly. We've got to get on and take a decision so that we can move forward and invest in the technology and industrializing the technology we've already developed with the prototyping we've done. And actually we know, and I'm sure Stefan will confirm, we know Germany have now published their hydrogen strategy. Netherlands are moving forward with it, other countries in Europe. So I wholeheartedly agree with Alexander. We've got to get on with it, otherwise we are going to miss those opportunities. So from my point of view, one of the things we've been advocating to government is actually to start mandating hydrogen-ready boilers from a certain time point in the future, so that we start to populate UK homes with boilers that are ready to fire hydrogen when the gas network is switched over to hydrogen in that particular region. And we're advocating that we do that at the latest 2025 onwards. The earlier we do it, the earlier we invest in that technology, and we open up the opportunities in terms of, as Alexander was saying, all the export and technology opportunities.
Thanks, Carl. Stefan, just bringing you in here, perhaps from a transportation perspective then. How quickly can we move on hydrogen? Obviously, we've seen some reports around, to your point, Alexander, earlier about buses as a potential. We've seen potential around heavy goods vehicles, but where is the technology in terms of making this a reality in the UK from a transport perspective, do you think?
Well, let me come in again on the previous one on national strategies. Now, first of all, I don't think that Germany and France are far ahead of the UK, to be honest. I think in both countries, hydrogen has appeared relatively recently on the political scene and in the public discussion. What I would say in any case also is this inevitably goes beyond single nation states, because if you think of the amount of power from renewable sources that is necessary to generate hydrogen in sufficient quantities, you will inevitably bring Southern Europe, Northern Africa, the Middle East into the game. So parts of this world where there is much more sunshine, where these required quantities of power can be generated using solar power or wind power in other parts of the world. So I think inevitably at one point we need to kind of connect these various national strategies and create at least a pan-European approach and strategy, maybe even one beyond Europe.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan. I'm gonna just throw this in there, and maybe I'll ask you, Alexander, this, but does Brexit throw in its way any challenges for us as a country to develop hydrogen, or does it potentially provide some opportunities? What's your thought there?
I think it provides opportunity, to be honest. I think both Brexit and uncertainty going forward, but also the uncertainty post-COVID means more than ever we need to move quickly. We can't afford for our economy, for our environment to lag behind. I think the next couple of years are going to be a very uncertain times for our economy, and uncertain times when it comes to how we deal with our carbon emissions. And I think hydrogen can help answer both of the questions. How do we develop our economy? How do we produce technologies that we can export again? Leaving the European Union gives opportunity to be able to sell this technology easier across the globe. So I think actually there's opportunities. And as I said, with COVID at the moment and the huge economic shock that has hit our economy, going to hit our economy for the next period, it's going to be a pretty tough times. We need something to work towards and say, it's going to be tough, but we can actually have a future of investing and then selling and developing our economy. So I think COVID and Brexit have actually forced us to think even more so when it comes to this technology. And that's one of the things we've got now COP end of next year. It's moved from this year to next year. And to me, you cannot get, we as a government, as a country, want to show off to the world because all the eyes of the climate world will be looking at us next year in Glasgow. We want to show them how far we've become. And hydrogen is not just about talking about what we do. In a year, we could have already put the procedures and measures in place to make this a reality. So hopefully by COP next year, we can actually use it as a launch pad to show, look at what we're doing and look what our future is, giving us that time to actually say, here is our line of plan, this is what we're going to do, and we are going to be a hydrogen first country, and we're going to lead the world.
Fantastic. Thanks, Alexander. I'm just going to bring back some of the questions that we've had on the YouTube chat as well. So Mark Johnson and also Ian Barham have asked a question around skills. So I guess it kind of links back to the fact that, we're in this potentially difficult economic time, and there's opportunities actually for hydrogen, but looking specifically around skills. And how do we have the skills currently to really launch this hydrogen revolution? And if not, what do we need to do? How do we get skills ready? We talk about getting hydrogen ready, but how do we get skills ready? And how do we support people to enter these types of jobs? Alexander, if I may, I'll ask you first, and then I'll go on to the gentleman from Bosch.
Well, I think there's going to be a lot more jobs, but we've also got to be realistic now. Under COVID, the economy is in pretty dire straits, and there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be unemployed, especially when it comes to the hospitality sector, especially coming in the service sector. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to lose their jobs. Now, we're going to have an interesting situation in the economy where we're going to have this large group of unemployed people, but at the same time, with these new technologies, with hydrogen, but other technologies as well, there's going to be a dearth of skills and people to fill the skills. So it's the government's job, I would say, with industry, to get the people who have been unemployed for this crisis to retool and reskill these people to move into these jobs. Now, my constituency, Rother Valley, as I said, is former heavy mining area. So it's still got a lot of that manufacturing and technical skills, or very rich in those. So the question is, how can we get these people who have got very good manufacturing skills upskilled into working for something in hydrogen? And that's something I'm very keen on. So it's a sort of a heavy responsibility of the government to actually move people on, because there'll be a lot of people out there who are looking for a job, who want to be skilled, but it's the government's job to create the atmosphere and the environment to actually invest in it. And that goes back to the hydrogen strategy, saying we then need to use that to make sure that we have enough people, enough investment to make hydrogen first a reality.
Carl, from your perspective on jobs and skills within the heating sector, where do you see the relationship working in harmony between business and government to perhaps accelerate these skills that companies like Worcester Bosch and others are going to need if we are to accelerate in the space of hydrogen?
Well, I think you need to generate a whole skill strategy around hydrogen as a future fuel, decarbonised fuel within the economy. So what we found, very much following on from what Alexander just said, we started prototyping hydrogen boilers about 3 years ago or more. There is no supply chain, or there was no supply chain at that time, very little skills. So to a certain extent, we had to go it alone with some very talented engineers locally in the business here in Worcester. So now let's assume we take a decision that hydrogen is part of a future decarbonised energy system here, then we've got to invest in the skills around that. So it's a very wide-ranging set of skills, from the whole skills around hydrogen economy, how you produce hydrogen in the first place, how you store it, how you transport it. Particularly our field is around hydrogen combustion and combustion management. There is safety engineering, and then the whole topic that Stefan's spoken about around fuel cells. So it's an extremely wide-ranging new sets of skills from our point of view, in terms of heating appliances, we see that requirement to upskill all of the heating engineers then in the UK. But that's a much simpler task at that point, because they already installed different gases. This will handle this as a different gas type. They need to be trained on it. They need to be educated on it. But that end is relatively simple. It's all the engineering and design and all of the high level skills that we need to create first. And then all the other skills will flow and follow once we get hydrogen into the economy.
Thanks, Carl. Stefan, can I bring you in on the skills point as well? I mean, from your perspective, and again, taking a slightly more macro look, what lessons could we learn from other countries? And I think particularly, this is something that Germany does very well in terms of linking engineering skills to jobs and to growing sectors. What could we learn, and what should we be doing in the UK to ensure we've got those right skills for technologies like hydrogen?
That's Helen. That is a discussion we've had for many years, to be honest. And how should I answer? I think there have always been excellent engineers in the UK. The problem has been that there were not enough of them, and that has changed a little bit in the last few years, but not much. Unfortunately, there are still too many excellent students that go for jobs in the city with banks or with insurance companies, legal firms, and so on. Now, can we learn from other countries? I'm very skeptical, to be honest, when it comes to transferring one concept that has worked in one country to another country. That normally doesn't work. What I would maybe suggest is a look at the United States. I mean, the United States in the beginning of the 1980s had a situation where there was an industrial hollow out, where basically they didn't produce anything else than airplanes at that time. And within a few decades, they have created a very vibrant startup scene, very techy, very much around the top universities, Stanford, MIT, and so on. And this has all happened in only 40 years. Now, if you look at the UK has a lot of those ingredients, Oxford, Cambridge, and the English language. It maybe doesn't have the California weather, but other than that, a lot of the ingredients are here, and that might be worth a look.
Yeah, thank you. Alexander, just reflecting on those points that Stefan made in particular for skills, how do we bake in the skills element into the hydrogen strategy, and is that something that is being planned? And then just a second question, Richard Evans on YouTube also asks, in your view, is there a general political consensus that there is a need and an alignment around the future hydrogen strategy?
Thank you for that. On the skills element, that needs to be baked in, frankly, to our economic recovery post-COVID, and that's going to be across the board. But when we're talking about hydrogen, we're not just talking, in my mind anyway, not just talking about the physical H2 doing that. It's if we're going to invest in hydrogen buses, we also need people to build lots of new buses. If we're talking about hydrogen boilers, as well as the hydrogen element, we need plumbers. So there's a whole wide range of skills that we need. It's not just the technical people who deal with hydrogen. The whole infrastructure needs to be redone. If we're going to put more hydrogen fuel stations in, we need people who rekit out petrol stations to have that skill to rekit them out to hydrogen. So there's a lot of skills needed. So yes, we need to have those skills embedded in the hydrogen strategy. On the political consensus, and I can't speak obviously for the opposition party, but my impression from the government side of things is, when conversations I have with the Prime Minister, they're very keen on hydrogen. They are going to look at it, and I've had conversations where they've said we need to make a decision soon whether we back this fully, with the impression that we are going to be backing this fully. Whatever that means, I don't know. And likewise, there was a debate in Westminster last week, 2 weeks ago, on alternative fuel vehicles, and literally around the table, we were talking about batteries as well, and biofuels, but everyone seemed to be saying that hydrogen is going to be at least part of the answer. And I think that's important because nobody yet has come up with the solutions to planes, buses, lorries, which isn't involving hydrogen really for low carbon. So there is a consensus. The question is how far into that do we go? How far do we invest? Do we want to be the leader and take that first step, or do we want to hang back a bit, let others develop technology, and then jump on the back once it's done? I'd always say, let's take that leap because that's the only way to get there, and then we'll reap the benefits. If we wait and let others develop technology and then us buy the technology, we're not going to get any economic benefit. We might get a carbon benefit, but not an economic benefit. So that is where the argument is going to be happening. Do we become a leader or a follower? But hydrogen is going to be one of the answers to our carbon issues.
Thanks, Alexander. I guess some of the myths, I guess, if you like, if you want to call them those, have been in the past around hydrogen. It's simply too expensive. You know, it's too difficult to do. It's you know, it would take a huge amount of investment in terms of development. Do those views still stand, or do you think we've moved on with hydrogen? That, you know, in actual fact, it's really that much different in terms of expense compared to what we want to try and do with the electrification of mobility. You know, where's your view on that? Do you think those myths still stand, or?
I don't think those myths stand. As I mentioned, Wrightbus, they could say if they have enough bus orders, they can make it cost parity with diesel buses. If you look at home heating, we talked about retrofitting homes, but we're talking about the Victorian Georgian stock. Victorian Georgian stock homes weren't built with central heating, but they were retrofitted with central heating. In my mind, there's no difference from retrofitting it a Georgian or Victorian older homes once again. So actually, yes, there's going to be a cost, but we've done similar things before and we'll do it again. So when it comes to the costs, I think actually in some ways, when you're doing a transport, putting in electric infrastructure is going to be far more costly and far more labor intensive actually than hydrogen. Because if you do, let's say, a more hydrogen infrastructure for transport, you just retrofit petrol stations. You don't need to have vast networks charges on street corners and all the implications to power grid there. You just basically retrofit petrol stations. That will be expensive, of course. But when you compare that to putting lots of charges and putting more pressure on the grid, I don't think it is going to be more expensive.
Thanks, Alexander. Carl, Stefan, did you want to just come in on that and perhaps some of those myths that we've heard around hydrogen these past few years, you know, do they still stand? What's your view? Carl, I'll ask you first.
I think as we've been discussing on this session already, the future is a global hydrogen economy. As Stefan was saying, we can produce quantities of hydrogen locally using wind power, doing some in the early transitionary phases, some steam methane reformation. But long term, a global market for hydrogen will develop, where you're generating hydrogen in the parts of the world where it's most economic to do so. And then you transport it all over the world in the same way as we've done with oil, and developed a global market for oil. A global market for hydrogen will develop. And therefore the costs will come down as the demand for that hydrogen goes up. So I think, yes, right now, today, you go and buy a canister of hydrogen, it's quite expensive. But once we develop hydrogen technology to be a long-term decarbonisation solution on a global scale, those costs will come down and come down fairly quickly.
Thanks, Carl. Stefan, your view in terms of some of those myths, you know, it's too expensive, it's too difficult, you know, what's your view on that from Bosch?
Well, see, again, I think you need to look into the various dimensions of it. What is certainly very expensive is building the distribution network. But here, I think you are talking about more or less similar amounts for electric powertrains and for hydrogen. There is not much of a difference there. When you look at now hydrogen, producing hydrogen, again, I would think we should not forget this option of synthetic fuels. Synthetic fuels, the projections are that by 2030, if we do everything right, by 2030, we can bring production costs down to something like €2 a liter. and by 2050 even further down to about €1 a ton. So you are looking at long term at something that is very competitive compared to fossil fuels. But at the same time, we should not I think we said that at the very beginning of the meeting, and both Alexander and Carl alluded to it. It is a giant task. It will take time, and it will take effort and money.
Yes, and we've had some questions that have come in on specifically on the money and the funding side. So what I want to do, we're about 15 minutes away from closing, and I really want to get in some more questions from the audience. Thank you for the amazing questions, Leaders Live community, that you have been posting through today. These are some great questions, and what I want to do now is perhaps just shift gear a little bit. If you've got some questions you'd like to ask the panel, let's do that now. We've got some questions already that I want to run through, and I know we don't have a huge amount of time. So let's kick off with some questions, if I may. So on YouTube, what is the primary way that hydrogen will be derived? Is it steam reformation or natural gas or electrolysis? If the former, how can we depend on carbon capture, which has failed to materialize so far? Alexander, I guess just from your personal background in terms of your previous jobs, do you have a view on that?
Well, I think obviously initially we're going to have to go for blue hydrogen, and the only way then of dealing with the carbon is carbon capture and storage. But I think as time goes on, we're more into the green hydrogen. So I very much believe something is better than nothing. So if you put coal at one end of the spectrum, and maybe like wind or solar at the other end, it is a sort of spectrum of how to get there. And to me, yes, there are some negatives, but we can mitigate it with carbon capture and storage for hydrogen. And then when we start producing green hydrogen at scale, and that will take a bit of time, the green hydrogen, but at that point, on the blue hydrogen, we've got the infrastructure sorted, and the business case, in my view, will be then completely met. Then we can go to green hydrogen, and that will answer the question. So we're not going to say as soon as we turn on hydrogen, it's going to be the most greenish form of energy ever. It's not. It's going to take some time, but by starting the process, we can get there.
Thank you. Victor Mewis also asks us a sort of similar question. He says about hydrogen being from grey sources, currently largely oil and gas, but to implement on large scale for heating and transport, the requirements would be enormous. What's the thinking within, I guess, without preempting a hydrogen strategy, but from government's perspective, what's the thinking in terms of shifting to a point where we do have enough of this resource to use, domestically and in our transport?
Well, yeah, and that's what I was trying to say about why we need to invest heavily and actually commit to it. To me, it's if we want to be a leader on this, we can't just sort of dip our toe into it. It's a sort of almost an all or nothing thing at this point. We need to go heavy and say, we know where we're going to go. Yes, over the next couple of years, we're going to develop that technology, and then we'll get to where we want to go. Hydrogen at the moment is still technology in its infancy, but it comes to certain elements of it, and we need to actually work through that. But we need to put the investment in now to get to the end goal. It's not going to be completely green rather, overnight, but we can get there once we start delivering it at scale. And there is a place, I would say, that's for the oil and gas companies. Not just I've worked for Shell, but because they have the scale and the technology and the scientists and the resources as well to actually get to that point as well. And as we've seen with the oil price at the moment, the BP, Shell, the likes, they're on their knees financially when it comes to the share price. And they want a future as well. And they have the resource and skill. So if we get them on board to help deliver this, we can get there quicker and faster than we would otherwise.
Thanks, Alexander. Also, Mark Johnson asks, which British companies are involved in the development of hydrogen as a proposition, and what consideration has been given to developing the skills and resources needed to meet the aspirations for the sector? I guess from Alexander, again, from your perspective on your work with the all-party parliamentary group on hydrogen, are you seeing a groundswell of businesses that are kind of coming on board looking at hydrogen now more than ever? What's the climate like out there? Obviously, we know Bosch are involved in hydrogen, but what's the sort of potential out there for us?
There seems to be quite interested on that. I mean, there are definitely leaders, and Worcester Bosch are one of the big leaders. I'll say, especially on heating, they're the leader. But then, as I mentioned, also Wrightbus are also looking at it. So lots of different companies are coming to government saying, we want to do this, we want to help in this. What can you as the government do to help us go to that situation? And we've got to realize the climate we are in, this economic climate, which are tough. A lot of companies are tightening their belts at the moment. So they do need that sort of help from the government. One of my concerns is that because companies might be cutting back a bit on R&D because of the financial climate, they might shy away from it. So it's the government's responsibility to then lead by example and say, this is our strategy, this is where we're going to go. And if you invest your R&D into this, you're going to get financial dividends. And that is why strategy is so important, rather than just waiting for companies necessarily to come forward off their own bat to sort of say, we'll do it, because that's not going to happen for the next 6, 9, 12 plus months. And that is where the government needs to come in and say, this is where we're going to go to, invest your R&D, and we can get that together, rather than waiting for that to come naturally forward.
Yeah. And Carla, I'm guessing you'd like that strategy sooner rather than later, I guess. Just if you want to comment back on Alexander's point, but also interested to know really what's the next steps for Worcester Bosch. We saw the technology a few weeks ago when we did our last session with Leaders Live, but where do you as a company head next? Obviously there is the need for a strategy, but in terms of piloting this technology and testing this out in certain areas, what's next for the company, and where could we find out more potentially about this happening?
Well, we're participating in the immediate term in some government-funded programs, particularly the High for Heat program, which is being funded by BEIS, which is looking at the whole feasibility of hydrogen right from beginning to end, right throughout the whole supply chain. And we're working on a work package which is just looking at the appliance in the home. So there are various phases associated with that, where we have already installed the first hydrogen boiler into a domestic dwelling as part of that High for Heat program, and we will continue that program of installing various prototypes through 2021 and 2022 to prove the whole safety case and to prove the whole concept of an end-to-end repurposing of the gas network for hydrogen. The next phase for us then is that these have all been fundamentally prototypes, hand-built prototypes. The next investment phase for us is to industrialize that design and redesign it ready for manufacture. And that will require a further phase of investment. And we're certainly working towards these appliances being ready to go to market 2024, 2025. That's a sort of time scale. Okay. And there will be a 2-year investment in industrializing that design to make it ready for sale into consumers' hands.
That's great. Thank you, Carl. Actually, just a quick follow-up question. Simon Ellis on Zoom also asks, how do you prevent hydrogen boilers from emitting higher levels of nitrogen oxide than gas boilers? Which is a bit of a technical question. I don't know if that's something that one of our technical guys can answer, or whether that's something for you, Carl.
I've got a non-technical answer to a technical question. So actually, in answer to that question, one of the things we've found, which has quite surprised us at the beginning, is a 100% hydrogen boiler emits lower NOx levels than a natural gas boiler. We never set out to achieve that. That was discovered to some degree by accident. So we've been researching the precise explanation and cause behind that. And we believe because of the higher flame speed, the combustion process is complete before the nitrous oxide has a chance to form. And therefore, there is all the evidence, we've tested it time and time again, and we've confirmed that with BEIS, that a hydrogen boiler does emit actually lower NOx levels than a natural gas.
Fantastic, thank you for that. Great answer. Stefan, just bringing you in, I guess perhaps even final point, big picture from Bosch point of view, where do you see the realisticness of hydrogen in terms of hydrogen transport happening in the next 5 and 10 years here in the UK? Is this still something that's very much way off, or could we really, with this industrial strategy, start to potentially see hydrogen transport on our roads?
The fuel cell as a powertrain option in a vehicle is basically something that is available already as a technology. I think the bottleneck for hydrogen in transport is rather the distribution network, and that will take some time to build and to create, just like it will on the electric powertrain side. But if I may, I can come back to what Alexander said earlier. I think the first steps into a hydrogen economy will probably require things that involve gray hydrogen and other fossil-based technology for some time. But I mean, let's not forget, at the end, if we talk about decarbonization, at the end we are talking and must talk about hydrogen produced via electrolysis using powerful renewable sources. That's it. And I think that's something that's often forgotten in the discussion, also with electric vehicles. I mean, an electric vehicle right now is a zero emission car locally in a certain area, but as long as the power that fires it comes from fossil fuels, and that is the case mostly, this car is not completely decarbonized. And the same goes for all hydrogen applications as well.
I mean, and that's a good point. And Alexander, I'll just bring you in on this. You know, we hear a lot within the transport sector of, you know, it's an either or. You know, it's either hydrogen, it's either electric, or it's hydrogen, or it has to be one source of potential technology. And at the moment, the most popular and the most advanced is electric. But from a policy perspective, I guess, surely it's right to perhaps looking at all technologies rather than trying to necessarily the UK picking a winner, as it sometimes talks about from a transport perspective. How do we ensure we keep that kind of open mind in the UK and not sort of cut ourselves off?
Well, I think that's essential, that we have a myriad of solutions. We don't know what the final example is of when we come of low carbon. I think my view is, and I think looking at the technology already out there, when it comes to passenger vehicles, that battery is almost over now when it comes to with electric leading the charge on that. However, I said there's still that solution. How do you get low carbon planes, HGV, boats? And I don't think electric is the answer. I mean, we've had some test pilots from electric planes with one engine running a bit on the battery, but really it's not that great. And like the hydrogen train pilot started in the UK, a hydrogen train pilots will be started in the UK, which shows it can be done. So I think for government, we need to be open to all answers when it comes to transport. But then again, it goes back to what I'm keenly saying is it's not just about getting the right range of technologies, which we'll have, you know, open countries, we use all technologies, but where can we also, as a UK PLC, make money and develop our own skill base to actually make something exportable? Because we can always buy this technology from other countries, but if we can have that niche, and I think hydrogen could be the UK's niche, we can then sell that to other countries whilst buying the battery and electric technology of other people, because we're not going to get the financial dividend. So it's important we look at it, but also we should also look at other solutions as well, whether it's biofuels and the likes as well, because those are still in the mix as well, and we should definitely consider them, especially when it comes to planes and trains as well.
Thanks, Alexander. I've got one last question, actually. It's from Trevor Langford. He says, given that Japan is committed to hydrogen for fuel cell transportation over battery EV, is Japan viewed as a competitor, or should we consider working closely and cooperating with Japan? I'm just also thinking about the free trade agreement as well. Is there an opportunity for more closer ties, do you think, Alexander?
Oh, completely. I mean, although it would be nice for us to develop all the technology ourselves, we need to work with and learn from other countries as well. But we do need to position ourselves as one of the leaders in this, and that's how we can benefit and have that expertise. But we can't be behind. If we work with Japan or any other country and get dividends, that's great. We need to work. We're a global world. We need to work together and we can develop the country, because ultimately, what is the reason why we're doing all this is to lower the world's carbon emissions from to halt on climate change and actually improve the world. That is ultimately what this is all about. So we need to work together. There's no point just us lowering our carbon emissions and ignoring everyone else, because then that's not going to work. So we need to work with other countries as well.
That's brilliant. And I think that that is a great point in which to finish on. Just to summarise, therefore, the hydrogen strategy in the UK is coming, and we look forward very much to seeing that when it comes. That there is a lot of technology for hydrogen that's already about to go. We've seen that through Worcester Bosch from a heating perspective, and developments are happening within transport as well, particularly in the bus area. There is an absolute need for green jobs in this country as we face a very challenging time ahead. But also there is a great need for us to reduce our carbon emissions overall. And as we head towards COP26 next year, all the more reason to get behind this strategy and hydrogen as a potential solution for all of those things. So I just want to thank my amazing panel. Thank you so much for joining today. It has been a great conversation. Thank you very, very much to our Leaders Live community. Again, your questions have been absolutely exceptional. Thank you. You really have made this event. So thank you for all of the questions you've submitted. I hope you have found it useful and informative. We'll be posting this session up on the Leaders Live website and also on our YouTube channel so that you can rewatch it and share. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to the channel and do send us your feedback and views. We're always looking for new topics. We want to make this as valuable for you as the viewer as possible. So thank you, everyone. And I wish you a good rest of your day. Thanks.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.